Sounds all very idealistic in terms of the police efforts that you're talking about, in terms of building safer communities, healthy communities. I mean, all of these things are really very necessary, but then at the same time, there's certain things in this country that are big business. And the prison system, building prisons, is big business. The whole system in terms of guards in prison. I mean, the prisons are some of the biggest employers, and the prison union is one of the biggest unions. So we're talking about certain things that are helping the economy to go. And so what's going to happen when you start attacking certain institutions the way you're talking about attacking these institutions? I mean, there are people who have a vested interest in keeping things going the way they're going.
If I got to say this, I'm sure the mayor, it's people do things for many reasons, and we would like to think we do it because we share the philosophy or the moral view. Absent that, people also do it because economics drive it. And so we should have reformed our prison system decades ago because it was the right thing to do. Now, we just don't have an option. We cannot afford the same policies we had 10 years ago. So whether people, so that prison industry kind of is created is one of the reasons why we're in a deficit. So now you have the realignment, you have the legislator, you have the governor, you have everybody realizing that whether they agreed with it or disagree with it, the way we were doing business, it cannot continue because—
Yes, and they're talking about cutting social services. They're not talking about cutting prisons.
Sure they are. They're talking about releasing thousands of people. They're talking about pushing it down to counties. They're also talking about cutting services as well, make no mistake. But they are realizing that they cannot keep putting billions, $8 billion into the correctional system. And so you are going to see a shift in the prison complex.
And will you see a shift where those people who are the neediest, those young people on the street who need education, those people who need health services, is there going to be a shift in providing those services that will enable people to not lead a life of crime? And not just for you, but...
Well, the amazing thing about being the age I am, that I remember 20, 30 years ago, they were predicting that the prison, what we spend on prisons would be more than what we spend on higher education in the state of California. And I couldn't believe that could ever really happen. Well, we're here. That's exactly what we're doing now. And we have a system that is crazy. If you put somebody, lock them up for 20 years, you spend $1.3 million locking them up for those 20 years. And when he gets out, you give him, for reentry program, you give him $200 and a bus pass. So yes, we do have, as Angela Davis says, I really believe she's right. We have a prison industrial complex, and it's really hard to break it. But with leadership like these two men and other chiefs and other places around where we're trying to break that cycle, I believe we can do it, but it's going to take the kind of work the chief's doing here with his reentry program and his second chance program. It's not an easy thing to, when somebody's been totally indoctrinated into a prison mindset and a gang mindset.
Yes, and when you have a system, and we're talking about the system and how the system in this country is geared, you can have, or tell me, you can have as many Chief Davises and as many Mayor Romeros as you want. Will they be enough to change the direction of the system?
Yeah, I think so, because I think people are waking up to the fact that it's not a very good use of our funds. But it's going to be tough. It took them a long time when they closed the California Youth Authority to lay off any guards. And toward the end there, 2 years ago, it was costing us $380,000 a year to lock a kid up for 1 year. Now you could give $380,000 to that kid's family, and they would be set for life.
But that's not going to happen.
No.
I mean, there's no money to be made by giving that money to a kid's family.
Well, we're going to have to learn to do that. And that's something that at the local level we can do. And we'll see, we have a governor that says he's going to push stuff down to the local level, but right now in the reentry program where it costs $40,000 to keep a person in state prison, he's given the county of San Mateo $7,000 to deal with.
Would you have a response? Any observations?
We're really going quite far away from the violence kind of focus and the criminal focus of this discussion. I mean, clearly, I think if you look at the environment, the culture in Washington D.C., we have a quote unquote $14 trillion deficit. We have the Democrats trying to outdo the Republicans in terms of actually cutting deficits. at least the Democrats are talking about possibly raising taxes to, not do all cuts to all programs. But we really do have kind of an elected officialdom at the federal level that is looking at cutting back on services. It is what we have. I actually think there are very few, if you want to talk about personalities, and I'm not counting myself in as being enlightened or progressive, but certainly the chief from a policing perspective, I'm not talking about his political perspective, but from a policing perspective, there are very few police chiefs in this country that are able to meld kind of the public safety piece, right, boots on the ground, with a good understanding of what kind of appropriate social and local policies are that kind of foment one trust in the community, but also that allow resources to go to civic organizations so that his job is not as tough, it's not as difficult. And who knows, maybe even one day we'll be able to turn to the chief and say, you know what, the fact that we're spending 65%, or if you look at the numbers, it's probably closer to 60% of our budget on police services, we're now going to go to 50, chief, because we've been so effective, right, at doing neighborhood policing. We've been so effective at figuring out where we need to put our social capital, right, and invest in the social institutions, that we're going to reduce the police force. Now, I think that the chief is able to say, look, if we want to have a better community, it's not about bullets and batons, right? It really is about trying to meld those two. But I think he's a rarity. I don't think there are a lot of people that are espousing. And that's unfortunate.
Even though he would say there are more and more people like him.
I think for the debate, and I appreciate the compliment, but I think there's more and more, maybe for different reasons. And I think we're, right now, local leadership, the mayor, the council, we're going to be, in the next 5 years, in my opinion, at one of the most critical point that will affect the next 25 years than I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is the change that can come about is really we're going to have a more say than ever before, I'm talking about in California, because the policies that many have been fighting from a social perspective, they're going to now have an opportunity to change them because of an economic perspective. And if I've seen nothing else in my life, is that when money comes into play, people act. And so now that it's costing too much for the prisons, now we're talking about realignment. Next will be reinvestment. And so now the question would be, with that reinvestment, what does East Palo Alto, what does the local communities want to see for the services for our constituency to make sure that we don't have these recidivism rates? And I think what ends up happening is, and I think the mayor is 100% right, is the more we get, and why I think the social programs are important for public safety. The more, and here's, even with this crime surge that we have right now, the key to fighting this crime surge is strategic approach. It is almost like being a surgeon. What you want from me is to surgically remove the small piece of cancer that's affecting the community without causing damage to everything around it. There are no acceptable collateral damage, if you will.